What is going on, YouTube? It's your boy Spanko, and today I'm excited because the ban list dropped, as we all know, but one of my favorite decks is still really good and really playable, and dare I say, still the best deck of the format, or at least top 2 in the format. I would think it is, and I actually talked to a couple guys who I would consider pro level guys, you know, those guys that have a lot of competitive success, help me build the deck, help me put it together. So what I'm about to show you is probably going to be one of the best decks of today's format. Now, if you guys do enjoy these videos, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more Yu-Gi-Oh content. I'm excited to get into this, so I'm just gonna leave it at that. All my social medias are in the description below, and with that, off to the video. Okay, so to get into the deck profile, we are starting off with the standard triple fractal, triple kit, double Keras, and triple Nerval. Now, the reason this deck I think is going to be good for a long time is even if they do other hits, I mean, of course, we know that this ban list didn't really hit the deck directly. However, what it did do is obviously hit Tenki to 1 for consistency. But even in that case, and even if in the future they hit Revolt to 1, the reason this deck is so good is because the monster cards, the main deck monsters themselves, do so much for you, and the engine is so consistent, which is why I think this deck is great. It might in the future evolve into a Lyrilisk build. There's so many ways to play this deck, and that's why I think this is one of the best decks, if not the best deck of the format, and even in upcoming formats, I think it could be really, really good. Now, of course, we're talking about the post-ban list, post-October ban list, and what I did was I spoke to a couple, I mean, I guess what you would call pro level players, really competitive players, and Rayhan, who actually just recently won the NA Remote Duel Invitational, helped me kind of put this together. And this build is very much like put together from a competitive standpoint, how to win at the highest of levels. So that's what this deck is. That's why I still think this is one of the best decks in the format. So of course we're playing the standard Tri-Brigade engine. We are also playing double Rescue Cat. Now, I will say this is a little bit of a change that I made. This is something that I really like when playing the deck. I like playing 2 cat, not 3. The only reason for that is there's 2 reasons, okay? One is the main reason is that you can only ever resolve cat once. And what I mean by that is, once you resolve cat once, you're going to be getting a kit and a Keras out of your deck. The second Keras, you're probably going to be searching with your Nerval anyways. Every cat after your first one is pretty much dead. That's why I only personally like 2 cats. On top of this, it's really, really susceptible to hand traps here. So that's why I didn't like to play cat at 3. Another reason, the second reason, is that people tend to like to play Desires in this deck. I cut Desires, as you guys can see, which I'll get into when I get into that part of the video. However, because of Desires being cut, I think 2 cat is enough. The reason people would like to play 3, of course, is with Desires, you have the risk of banishing them, and that's why you want to play 3, of course. But because I'm not playing Desires, I think 2 is just perfectly fine. Then for the hand trap lineup, we are running a pretty, I guess, not standard per se, but a very versatile hand trap lineup. So we're playing triple Ash Blossom, double Ghost Bell, double DD Crow, which by the way, not a lot of people play DD Crow, but I have been loving this card in so many situations. DD Crow is an insane card against the Drytron matchup, even against the mirror match. If you hit certain things, it can be pretty good. I know people will say, oh, but you can just revolt it back. That's true, it is true, but there are times where if you see your opponent only has 2 beasts or 2 tri-beast monsters in the graveyard and you DD Crow one of them, they're passing a lot of the time. If they have a normal summon and then they're like, okay, well, I can't use the effect to banish and special summon from my extra deck, then it could be in a really weird position, right? So that's why DD Crow I think at 2 is really good. Against a lot of rogue decks, Crow is good as well, so that's why I like double Crow. Then we are playing triple Gamma as well as a 1 driver. Now, this is the one thing that I want to talk about is originally, because this is post ban list and the ban list comes out kind of the same day as the Megatins, so post ban list / post Megatins, I really wanted to play Crossout Designator, and I thought Crossout Designator was going to be great. Well, to be honest with you, taking advice from some of my friends who compete at those really high levels, they actually said that Crossout Designator is not great in Tri-Brigade. One of the main reasons being that Tri-Brigade doesn't lose to a lot of hand traps to begin with, so why play a Crossout Designator? In the sense of like, hey, now I have to have the Crossout in my hand, and I have to have my starters, and my opponent has to have the specific hand trap for Crossout to be live, if that makes sense, right? Because if they don't have the hand trap, Crossout is a dead card in my hand, which in a lot of situations, you really don't want dead cards in your hand, and that's why Gamma is really, really good. Now, you could also make the argument that it's like, oh, well, if Crossout Designator is just dead, you can put it back into your deck with something like your Fairjeet or something with like your Bear Brum when you have to put something to the bottom of the deck. That's true, don't get me wrong, that's still a fair and valid point. However, just by talking to them and just by discussing all the ideas with them, they kind of just said Crossout is not that great. So that's why really I just took their advice, and they told me not to play Crossout. They told me it's going to be a lot worse in a lot of situations, that it is good, and I was like, all right, well then I guess we're playing Gamma.
because Gamma is really good, of course, with Atsukat. Gamma is really good with Fractal. Gamma is really good with Tenki. So that's why we are playing triple Gamma. We're also playing this, and this is the new card that I was advised to play. And I saw this and I was like, why this? And then I read into it a little bit more. I'm like, wait, this card is insane. So pretty much Tri-Brigade, Airborne Assault, 2 of them. And what this really does for you is it is an extender. Now, a lot of the Tri-Zoo builds, because Barrage went to 0 and we have Tenki at 1, Tri-Zoo is a little bit weaker, right? The Zodiac engine, what it did for you is it provided extenders. It's like, okay, well, now I can do my Zoo plays. If my Zoo plays get stopped, then I go Tri-Brigade plays, or vice versa. If I do my Tri-Brigade plays, then if my Tri-Brigade plays get stopped, I go my Zoo plays, and then I go from there, right? So those are like extenders. They're kind of like, hey, I'm going to do one thing. If this gets stopped, I do the other thing. Whereas now, because you don't have the Zoo engine, it's not as powerful anymore. What Airborne Assault does, by the way, I'm going to read this card so you guys can get an understanding. It's pretty much you can target a beast, beast warrior, or wing beast, monster that you control. You special summon one of the tri-beasts from your deck in defense position with a different type and a less attack, and then its effect is negated, which is fine. And then you're locked into link monsters for the rest of the turn. Again, that's fine. So what this does for you is it provides you with an extender, because there's going to be cards like Effect Veiler, there's going to be cards like Imperm that are going to like negate one of your Tri-Brigade monsters on board. And when that happens, Airborne Assault is really, really good for you, because then it's your extender. It can push you through hand traps. And that's another thing that we were talking about, is kind of like, hey, we don't want cards that's like, hey, what if my opponent has this? What if my opponent has this? It's kind of like, whatever my opponent has, I'm going to play through it, and we're going to continue making our board, right? And that's why Airborne Assault is so, so good. I've been loving this card in testing. I think this card is great. Then we are playing double, triple tactical talents. Now, this kind of is counterintuitive in the sense of like, we just talked about, hey, why would I want to be reliant on my opponent doing something first and then me reacting? Like, you don't want to react, essentially. You want to be completely active the entire time. So that's why this is usually Desires in a lot of people's decks, okay? I personally, for one, I'm not a big fan of Desires. And 2, on top of that, I've been playing this deck with Desires originally. And the more I played Desires, the more I realized I was kind of like, you don't need the Desires. This deck is so consistent. Rescue Cat, you got your Fractals, you got your Nervals. Even just Nerval normal summon is really consistent. Like, this deck is so consistent in so many ways that I was kind of like, what is Desires really doing for you? Because you're gonna get, if you open just one Fractal, you're gonna get through your entire engine anyways. So if you Desires, the only thing you're really banishing is probably the hand traps in your deck, which in my opinion was just never a good thing, because the whole point of Desires, or the whole point of drawing cards, is to draw into those extra hand traps, or to draw into those extra extenders, where this deck is just so consistent already that I felt like I didn't need Desires, right? So I decided to play TTT because I think TTT is insane. So even if my opponent uses a hand trap, I will get to either take a card out of their hand, so now they're starting with 3 cards in their hand, right? Or I get to draw 2 cards, which is in itself is just a draw 2 if I want to, right? And then if I'm going second, especially, this card helps you a lot going second, because if you are going against, like, let's say something like the mirror match, and they make an Apollo and they use an Apollo negate, where it's like, okay, well, now I can TTT, take your Apollo. What are you going to do from there, right? So this card is insane in so many ways. This card is so good, and that's why I just really like playing this at 2. We also got Called by the Grave here, Called by the Grave just at 1, of course. This is really interesting. So you can target one monster your opponent controls, banish it, and if you do until the next turn, the effects are negated. Now, the effects are negated. If you Called by the Grave, if you happen to have Called by the Grave and TTT in your hand at the same time, they work. And the reason for that is you can, if your opponent activates a hand trap and you go Called by the Grave, you can still activate TTT, because TTT's condition is that your opponent has to activate a monster effect. This doesn't negate activation. Gamma negates activation, so you can't go Gamma and then go TTT, because Gamma does negate activation of card effect, whereas Call by the Grave doesn't negate the activation, it negates that card effect, okay? So that's why Call by the Grave with TTT is also really strong as well. We also got cards like Triple Infinite Impermanence. This card's insane. Triple Revolt. A lot of people like to cut Revolt to 2. So let me tell you, a lot of people, what they do is they cut Revolt to 2 and then they play Triple Pot of Desires. Again, I just don't like Desires, so I like Triple Revolt. Also, I really like drawing Revolt, because when you draw Revolt, one of the main things with this deck is your opponent is really hoping that you go into Bear Brum and then they can just stop your Bear Brum. Whether they have any kind of negate, they can negate your Bear Brum. So then you can't get to Revolt. The reason I love drawing Revolt is because it helps you make boards where you end on double Dragon Lords and the Apollo, which is insanely strong. And you already like top that, like you already drew the Revolt. You're never gonna have to go into Bear Brum, which means Bear Brum is gonna be useful for you turns 2, turns 3, or future turns where you can get into a second Revolt, and then you can have complete control of the game state. So that's why I personally like Triple Revolt. Then of course triple strike. Strike plus revolt is just so strong together. And then 1 Imperial Order. Of course, this card is insane as well. So Imperial Order is great. Just before we go into the extra deck here, what I do want to say is these cards that you see here in the side deck are pretty much other cards you can play in your main deck if you wanted to. I just wanted to show you guys some other options. I know some people are actually cutting Bell out of their decks. So you can cut the bells and play Effect Veiler instead if you wanted to. Like this could be 2 Effect Veilers, it could be 2 bells. I just want to show you guys different options that you guys can play. Again, you guys can play triple TTT instead of the triple revolt. You guys can do that as well. I've seen people do that. Crossout Designator, if you wanted to play that instead of the gammas, you can do that as well. It's really up to personal preference, but this build was really made based off of the help of like high competitive players who also play this deck at a really competitive level, right? You got stuff like Prosperity if you want to play Prosperity in here. There's just different options for you to play, right? So that's it for the side deck. Don't look at the side deck and think like, oh, this is what your side deck should be. No, this is not what your side deck should look like. It's just more like different options you can play, right? So of course we're playing the standard double Omen, double Ferajit, the Bear Brum. We're playing the 1 Rugal. It's pretty standard. We are playing 1 double Dragon Lords. Now double Dragon Lords is still a great card, but it's not as good anymore. The reason this card was insane is because this plus Tenki was just so good, because you can just have it on the board and send all your extra Tenkis to the graveyard, and then you're always gonna have this on board, right? Whereas now we only have 1 Tenki, so it's not as good anymore. It's still a really good card, but it's not one of the things where I could just slap it on the board and leave it there, right? And then we obviously got 1 Desperate Doom Eagle, 1 Apollo, we got 1 Access Code, of course. I like to play personally 1 Daruma Doll, which I'll get into, but we are playing 1 Almirage, 1 Zeus, 1 Centuria, and 1 Omega. Now, if you didn't want to play this, you could play the Downward Magician here as well for the Zeus package. The reason I chose not to is because really you don't ever need to make Zeus for more than 1. Zeus for 1 is enough to win you games, and honestly, if you're making Zeus because you're in such a like good position where it doesn't matter what your opponent does, you're just going to Zeus them and you're just going to win after that, right? That's why Zeus is really, really good, of course. But the reason I like to play the Daruma Doll is because I find a lot of the time, if I need to link climb and I need just an extra card, I don't want to waste my double Dragon Lords, or I don't want to waste the Ferajit. I'll just make the Daruma Doll just so I can link climb to like an Apollo or something, and then just leave it at that, right? So that's just my personal preference. I kind of like this card. It also gives you a fire for Access Code Talker to pop that's not Bear Brum if you just wanted to do that. There's just different options, right? That's kind of why I like to play it that way. But again, you guys could put the Downward Magician. You guys even could put a Lambda in here as well because of course you're playing Gamma. So there are options. I'm trying to give you guys different options of different ways to play a deck, but that is it for the deck profile. 15 cards in the extra, of course, and 40 cards in the main deck. This deck I think is going to be one of the best decks in the format, if not the best deck in the format. Top 2 at worst, it's going to be top 2, right? So I think this deck is really, really good. I really encourage you, especially with the Mega 10 reprints, to pick this up, try it out yourselves. This deck is so fun, and pick up your Airborne Assaults. They're only $2 a pop right now, and you never know. These could be like $20 cards if it kicks off, right? I really like the card. I think it's really, really cool. But let me know what you guys think. That's it for the deck profile.
So that is it for today's video. I hope you guys did enjoy. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below about this format. I know this format hasn't really changed too much from the last format, or at least we predict it to not change too much from the last format. However, I will say that I think what this format does do is it provides a little bit more variety, and I say that because even though Tri-Brigade I think still is one of the best decks of the format, it is of course a little bit weaker, which means more decks can arise. And Italy being at 2, Crossout Designator coming out, there's a lot of options. But yeah, that's really all I gotta say. Thank you guys all for watching. I really did hope you enjoyed. And with that, Spanko signing out. Peace!